Broadcasting live from hell, this is The Monstrous Feminine, the podcast where horrible women talk about horror. My name's Louisa, and I'm joined by my magical coven,
Mila,
Tyia,
and Zeba.
And this week, we're going back to our countdown of female horror tropes as outlined by feminist film theorist Barbara Creed. So if you haven't seen episode 1 or 2 yet, go back and catch up because this week we are going to be talking all about the last of Creed's tropes, the monstrous womb.
To start with, we are going to talk about the 1968 film Rosemary's Baby, directed by paedophile and rapist Roman Polanski. We have no interest in separating art from the artist, and our discussion will forefront the evils he has committed. Fuck the Hollywood elite who continue to defend him. Fuck everyone who thinks child rape and sexual assault are redeemable acts as long as the assailant is deemed culturally valuable. And fuck the sensationalist media and corrupt justice system while we're at it. The second film we're going to tackle is the 2019 drama horror, The Room, directed by Christian Volckman. Enjoy!
So how have you guys been?
Good.
It's alright. Do you want to hear some womb facts?
Yes, I do.
In ancient Egypt and then carried on by ancient Greece, there was this belief that the womb could just like wander around the inside of your body and like cause your other parts of your body to like mess up or get ill. So it was like a kind of living animal within you, like just kind of wandered around. And that is where we're thought to have the root of hysteria come from. Because like the Greek word for womb is hysterica. I don't know how to say that. It's probably wrong.
That's cute. That's like a celebrity baby name.
Yeah, so, but to fix the wandering womb condition, they would put different smells next to your mouth and genitals, like, to try to move it back to your place. Like, unattractive smells next to your nose and, like, nice ones next to your vagina to make it go back into its little location.
I kind of dig the idea here of the womb being this, like, naughty little organ.
Anyway, those were some facts that I got that I thought were really fun. So, do we want to talk about what Creed says about the monstrous womb? What's your guys' understanding of that?
So, and we talked about it in our first episode together, the idea of the womb being horrific because it's the abject, so something that we find unsettling and therefore it invokes fear and I guess uncanniness. And the fact that we bleed out of our wombs also ties into the whole idea of abjection.
Yeah, like that blood is it like produces, it's the origin of life, and it's like the point at which we become from thing to person. And when you give birth, like after birth, blood comes out and all these things that remind us of our own mortality or our own animalistic nature. And that's basically what Creed writes, that men fear about birth and wombs because it reminds them of our connection to nature, which is uncontrollable. So
I just think it's funny how it's mostly Western cultures that have this like weird religious fear of the womb, though, because I mean, I can only speak for India, but there's a lot of like holy womb imagery that goes along with the phallus. So like both the phallus, the phallic and the yonic are considered holy equally, and you're considered holy when you find a balance between the two. And there's like so much worship of like the shape of the vagina and also the womb together. And I think that's true in like most of the non-Western world. So I don't have any deep theory as to why that is, but you know, it's misogyny.
Yeah.
Do you think it's just rooted in Christianity, like Judaism, Christianity, or
I don't know, because it goes against anything Freudian as well, as like you want to return to the womb, or you want to like return to the place that's safe and warm and all your needs are met. So I never really understood. I mean, besides like fear of periods or fear of menstruating, beyond that, like the womb itself does some pretty miraculous stuff. And it, you know, like even the Virgin Mary as a concept is like, okay, but the baby was in a womb. So like I don't understand the like association, like automatic association with insanity or the devil or beyond the like hormones hysteria theory.
I think it's definitely a point about controlling a woman's body, and it's like if it's something that needs to be policed, which is more of a patriarchal or thing, which is essentially what Creed is saying. She says that if women are connected to nature, then they exist. She says exactly, I'll read it. Women's reproductive functions places her out on the side of nature rather than symbolic order. So it becomes a thing in Western culture to control and police.
Zeba, what you said now, I am rethinking the whole Freudian idea of why is returning to the womb seen as something really
This
fearful.
Might be a reach.
It's just horror that makes it.
This might be a reach, but perhaps like the idea of the womb being scary and used in horror is part of it rooted in patriarchy due to like the womb is the only place where a male is not in charge and they can't control anything. You're completely at the woman's mercy who's carrying you. And it's the only time where a woman has complete control, I guess, over her life in a sense. And maybe that's why we see so many people trying to regulate it, because you can end the pregnancy if that's what you desire to do, or put the baby up for adoption. It's the only time where I think a man is not on top of society and they're completely at the mercy of a woman, especially when they're a baby as well.
That's a great point. Why do you guys think that the canon, or like what tropes do you think of in horror when you think of the monstrous womb? Like, how would you describe the canon?
The devil baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like that Antichrist will come from a woman, or like the Antichrist will come from a woman's being dumb. Like it's that classic Eve taking the apple trope. It almost has nothing to do with a man ever. Like men might be around, they might be present, but it's always like the folly of woman that creates the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Maybe this is like similar to the point that we made, I think on the first episode, where we were saying like possession is rooted in like penetration, and the same concept with the woman having to birth the Antichrist is like there's no way a man could be evolved due to the penetration and the castration anxiety and everything associated with it as well. I think we made that point in episode 1.
That's great. But you know how when we were brainstorming for this episode, do you know how when we were talking about how why can't we find any black women's horror movies which are about the womb? Because you would think, right? Given the fact that the statistics are so bleak. And I can read a few now. It's the same, well not the same, but it's similar situations in the US and the UK. And seeing as we're all transatlantic, I'm going to read statistics about that. But in the US, in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it says that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. And in the UK Confidential Inquiry into Maternal Deaths, the chance of death is 1 in 2,500 for black women, but the rate was 5 times smaller for white women between 2014 and 2016. So obviously those are really alarming, and it's just almost ironic that most of the horror we talk about when we talk about the monstrous room is always like a white family and a white woman, and I just think that's interesting because it seems like if anyone would write horror about this, it would be black women.
I think what Tyia said about Zeba said, well, maybe both of you said the idea of the sort of Eve character being folly, being innocent, sort of just happens into this situation of giving birth to the Antichrist. I feel like in mainstream horror in terms of the filmmakers and the audience reception, apparently we can't portray black women as somebody who can be innocent.
Maybe, but don't you think like the woman is always being punished?
And I don't think it's not so much that it's like two sides of the coin where they're pretty and innocent and oops, she ate the apple, but it's like rooted in misogyny as well. It's sort of it's not wholly good.
Okay.
I think it's kind of partially because I think the public perception of womanhood and what they consider as womanhood is valuable womanhood or innocence is always white womanhood. So I think that the portrayal is always just like this blonde white woman who's very frail.
I don't think, also, fertility doesn't look like what media would have you think it looks like. Like, all these women are very, like, fertility traditionally in art is like, you gotta have some hips, you have, like, generally it's like a fuller figure, generally it's like, it's not about, like, the luster of your hair or the blondness of it, or, like, I mean, I'm skipping a little bit ahead to the Mira Farrow situation, but like that is not what I imagine in my mind's eye or even in art history as like the image of fertility. Like we've fictionalized what fertility looks like in the real world.
So Polanski initially wanted a curvier woman. I think he wanted Sharon Tate, his wife, to play the part. I'm saying curvy and like, you can't see my air bunnies.
Sharon Tate was still quite tiny though.
I know, no, that's hence the air bunnies, is in his, according to his standards. He wanted that more like Botticelli-esque voluptuous woman. Obviously that is still just a slender woman, but comparing to Mia Farrow, who is that more like Twiggy type. And Twiggy, I mean, is in the model. I'm not calling it Twiggy.
Mia Farrow have like 1,000 children as well, though?
Yeah.
But they were adopted.
Oh.
I think they were adopted. I think she was Angelina Jolie before Angelina Jolie.
She made that. She invented the idea of adoption.
No, the original was Josephine Baker. What did she call them? The Rainbow Tribe?
That is true. Yeah.
Josephine Baker was the OG, tiny woman to adopt children from all over the world. And that was like back in 20s, 30s. She was a flapper.
Okay.
So, yeah, black women being erased again. Josephine Baker's the original Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, what we're saying is that also what we imagine to be the monstrous womb is heavily influenced by Roman Polanski's vision of womanhood in Rosemary's Baby, which is not great that our version relies on him, or our vision relies on him.
The thing that confused me about Rosemary's Baby, and how did it take so little effort to deliver the Antichrist? But in Twilight, she was like about to die from carrying a vampire baby. So I'm like, is that simple to carry that child?
Yeah.
Rosemary was suffering. What are you talking
Not
about?
to the extent of Bella, where Bella was like, I have to be turned into a vampire because I cannot carry this child.
She low-key was. Like, the only reason Bella was suffering is because it was taking her blood, but Rosemary was also suffering and eating raw meat and, like, doing...
Yeah.
I mean, there was, like, a lady who was pregnant on My Strange Addiction, and she would eat, like, crayons and stuff like that. So I'm like, I mean, it could just be a weird pregnancy craving to eat raw meat.
Yeah, it's because you're iron deficient. You need minerals. That's like a thing.
I feel like her pregnancy seemed simpler than Bella's for her to be carrying the child of the devil in Rosemary's Baby. Like, it was hard, but it wasn't like she about to die from bending over. Renesmee, like, clawed her way out of Bella's stomach or, like, ate her way out of Bella's stomach.
Yeah.
Edward ate his way into her womb to get Renesmee out. Yes, he did. Yes, he
No,
did.
He made it worse.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Why couldn't they do a C-section?
He did.
Why couldn't they?
So he did a C-section with his teeth.
Okay, but my question is, why couldn't they do a C-section before it was life and death? Like, while she was like a calm 8.5 months, why didn't they do a C-section?
Also, Carlisle's our doctor. Why didn't they do that?
Like, they could have took that baby out as a preemie and, like, hoped for the best. There was no reason she had to incubate
for that long.
Also, the baby grew up, like, instantaneously as well. Like, she grew up faster than the other kids, so it really
That's
didn't
true,
make
but
sense
as
for them
soon
not
as
to do
soon
early
as
delivery. That is true.
As soon as she looked like a toothpick with a grape on it, I think you're good to go.
I really want to watch this film again.
You should always watch it. I watch it like at least every 3 months. Just to keep fresh. Every time I get moderately stressed out in life, which is a lot, I will rewatch Twilight because it reminds me of a simpler time.
Yeah, I truly feel like a preteen again, but I also realize like where I got all my unhealthy relationship expectations from, like very
like,
clearly came from Twilight.
You. I'm like, why doesn't anyone want to die for me? I'll die for anyone.
I'll dead ass die. I'll die. But no one wants to die for me because I didn't read Twilight. I'm
Just
upset.
send them the PDF of Midnight Sun.
It's like 800 pages. It's a big commitment. If they can commit to all 800 pages of Midnight Sun, they can commit to me.
I'm probably less work than 800 pages of Midnight Sun.
I'm about just as much work. Twilight Breaking Dawn also has that like Mormon no sex before marriage and no abortion propaganda.
It does. Why the fuck is Edwin such a loser? Why?
He's a 110-year-old virgin.
He's from whenever he is.
Like the 1700s, whenever Spanish influenza was.
That was not the
1918,
fam. That was 1920.
Okay, I didn't profess to be a historian. This is not a history podcast.
The first film we're discussing is the 1968 classic Rosemary's Baby, which follows Rosemary and Guy, a new couple who have moved into a New York City apartment building with a suspicious history of witchcraft. The story centers itself on Rosemary, who is tricked by a satanic coven into carrying the child of Satan.
I can't stay too long here. They'll be coming looking for me. Dr. Hill? Dr. Hill, there's a plot. I know that sounds crazy. You're probably thinking, my God, this poor girl is really flipped. But I haven't flipped, Dr. Hill. I swear, by all the saints, I haven't. There are plots against people, aren't there?
Yes, I suppose there are.
Well, there's one against me and my baby.
Anybody have anything to say about Roman Polanski before we begin?
I don't want it to be disrespectful, but I feel really bad that like so many people associate Sharon Tate's legacy with Roman Polanski because she seems like she was a really angelic and wonderful person, and she does not deserve to be tied to someone who has such a dark, disgusting past of pedophilia and rape.
Also, yeah, just to reiterate what we said at the beginning, our analysis is going to take what Polanski's been accused of in mind. You can't read this film, especially as it features rape. You can't read this without acknowledging that, and we will. Polanski, listen up. From France.
What did you guys think of the movie? I know that this is like a horror movie classic, but it's not really like scary, I would say. Probably back when it was released, it was probably scary, but it's not really scary, but it's a lot of symbolism.
You know how people like fainted when The Exorcist was in theaters, and actually The Exorcist is like not scary. It's like that thing. Like anything.
The Exorcist is scary to me.
The Exorcist is like it depends on when you catch me watching it. Like if it's nighttime, I definitely will be creeped out.
Yeah, but like it's not like you wouldn't faint watching it, but because of like the religious like audacity or the blasphemy of it, people like react so like viscerally to these films when they're out, in like the context of when they come out. I mean, because you were saying, why is it such a horror classic when it's not exactly a horror? And I was like, well, anything that like is very blasphemous at this time would have been quite horrible for people, considering the reaction to The Exorcist.
I would definitely call this a horror movie.
During this time period, I think the nuclear family was emphasized more than it is in modern day. So, like, the idea that you can be married and have, like, this cute apartment and have your whole life ahead of you and then suddenly give birth to something so unholy would be terrifying to this ideal family unit of, like, the blonde, skinny wife and her handsome, buff, brunette husband who's successful. Like, I think that threateningness of the family and the nuclear family was also what terrified people.
Yeah, it's also, like, in the film, there's, like, this moment where they show that 1966 Times cover is God Dead, which was talking about like the dwindling influence of God in modern people's lives. So it kind of relates to that, like there was this fear of this like collapsing of values, like family values, of God, of church. There was a fear of like rise in sort of cults, and communist paranoia was also increasing. So it was kind of all feeding into this moment of anxiety in 1960s America.
I don't think you even need to necessarily be religious or have fears towards the occult to find this movie scary, because I watch this and I feel really unsettled and quite scared, even though it's not grounded in like my own fear of Satan.
I think the truly terrifying thing in this film is the sheer amount of gaslighting by every single person in her life that takes place around her body. And I think that's something even now women can relate to. Not even now, still now women can relate to watching back. Like I said it's not a horror, but I meant like in the sense that like there's not really any blood and guts, no one really dies. Like it's not like the traditional horror that you'd think of, but it's become like canon horror because of the fact that that's just so, well, monstrous to think about. How manipulated she is.
Rosemary is the only person that film who wears baby blue like all the time, which is like supposed to be a color symbolic of heaven. And so I think she's just portrayed as like the absolute most innocent, pure person, and then everyone else around her slowly is like pouring this evil inside of her and feeding the child inside of her as evil. And so also I wonder if she would have given birth not around this cult, would the baby have been different?
No, because it was still Satan's
but
baby.
Like,
yeah.
But if she didn't know?
Are you really gonna posit a nature versus nurture argument here for Satan? I don't know about that.
Because, like, she literally woke up and the baby was, like, in the little crib, and she was like, what did you do to his eyes? And they were like, he has his father's eyes. And no offense, but, like, for 5 seconds, I literally was sitting there thinking, what color are his eyes meant? Then I was like, oh.
No, but he's described as also having hooves. Like, this is not a human baby. Like, in the book, he's described as, like, having, like, hooves and bloodshot eyes and, like, other satanic deformities. Like, this is very much, you would look at it and be like, that is a demon.
I guess the book would help the context. Okay. Because I was like, just like a normal baby with red eyes.
But what do you think of that? Like, the fact that they didn't show it. Do you think that makes it scarier, the fact that they left it to the imagination for the film?
100%.
Yeah. I think so, because it's like, it's not even anticlimactic like you would expect. You're just like, you're more horrified that she's rocking this, like, mysterious, she's resigned to being the mother to this horrible creature that she's been forced to give birth to.
What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?
He has his father's eyes.
What are you talking about? Guy's eyes are normal. What have you done to him, you maniac?
Satan is his father, not Guy. He came up from hell and begat a son of mortal woman. Hail Satan!
Hail Satan!
So after she looks into the crib, and that iconic shot of her hand over mouth, wide-eyed, I love that so much. And I think if it then cut to this like weird sort of either prosthetic or not CGI, but prosthetic sort of Satan baby, you'd be like,
lame.
No. Lame. What the fuck? Even I think like a 68 audience would be like, it's kind of like when the monster is shown or cheapened. That's good. Yeah.
In 1977, Polanski pled guilty to having sex with a minor. He was accused of drugging and raping a 13-year-old. He says he didn't know her age. Polanski spent 42 days in a Californian jail being psychologically evaluated. Then he fled to France.
Polanski is directly related to this sort of Me Too moment that we're still kind of living in, with like scandals of like Hollywood. And the fact that within this film, it's like weirdly prophetic because her husband makes this deal, which Rosemary's husband, Guy, makes this deal to get her pregnant in order to become a successful actor. So it's just kind of spooky, or not spooky, but just so like the fact that this film is so meta and the people involved in it were perpetrating that as well is just so like, was there... Like, do you think that they reflected on that they knew what they were doing, or they genuinely believe that they're innocent people? Sorry.
Innocent people, I would go with. Because unless maybe it's so you can be so self-indulgent that you make a film like sort of laden with your crimes and your evils. Maybe you would do that subconsciously or not. But I would say it's just, let's make a fun movie about the devil. Oops, I'm the devil as well.
The scene where the husband lets her have it's like a pudding or a chocolate mousse or something, and then he's the one to like take her whatever to get raped by the devil or inseminated and all of that. But the fact that she wakes up in the morning and he was like, oh, I didn't want to miss your like fertility window or your ovulation window, and she's like, she's very not chill about it. Like, she definitely thinks it was a wrong thing to do, but she's not gonna call him out on it. She was like, oh, like, I get how you were thinking, but we could have waited until the morning, or we could have waited till the next day. Like, it wasn't like I can only get pregnant tonight, this second. Like, her rationalizing it for herself and for him was so uncomfortable, and I couldn't tell, like, as a viewer, if it was being rationalized to me, if it was being rationalized to the characters, if the writers and directors actually thought that would have been a fucked up thing for a husband to do, Satan or not. It seemed like it was being explained away, and while it does go along with the gaslighting that happens throughout the whole of it, like, I feel like that is something that would happen in a marriage, and it would just get glossed over, and it was very uncomfortable.
I looked it up because I was curious, because it also made me uncomfortable, and I was curious about, like, if there would be a moral framework already in place. But I think conversations about making marital rape illegal arose in, like, the 60s time, but it was not made illegal completely in all 50 states until 1993, can you believe? But maybe, I don't know how much awareness at the time there was of that, because I also was wondering, like, is it meant to be explained away, or am I meant to feel like uncomfortable as I do, or am I bringing 21st century moralism into it? I can't tell.
I think that also this is where, like, it gets more complicated with knowing a sort of background of the director. So if I had watched this blind, I would have actually felt like her acting, her reaction towards her husband raping her was almost sort of realistic, in the sense that she feels, you can tell that she, you know, her monologue is being like, what the fuck happened? But there's also a sense that she's trying to rationalize it and explain it away, because also why would my husband rape me? And I feel like then a few scenes later, when she senses then the distance between them, like, I think there is a sort of, especially with rape victims, like, because society is sort of trying to silence you, then you do internalize that, and you're trying to rationalize and think, maybe that's not what happened to me. And I kind of see that with how she acts. But then again, we've got to put on a different lens, the Polanski lens, and maybe that's just, I don't know.
I think it's like, the thing that scares me is I do feel like there is some awareness, or they are trying to make it seem like suspicious that he did that. At the very least, maybe not wrong, but suspicious.
Yeah.
Because he then says, maybe he then says a line of like, oh, it was like cool in like a necrophiliac sort of way. And I'm like,
yeah, and what?
And it's just like, and I think as an audience member, you're meant to think, that's weird for him to say. So I don't think you're meant to wholly accept it, which makes me even more uncomfortable, because Polanski's like acknowledging maybe that it's a little bit iffy, because he's using that as an Easter egg of suspicion that's going to be really relevant later.
I thought the point that was trying to be made was that, so if this is the Antichrist, I thought the point that was trying to be made was like that God is dead, and that like the conception of Christ was also not consensual.
What do you mean with the Virgin Mary?
Yeah, like I thought, like I don't agree with the point, but I thought the point that was trying to be made was that, like, okay, so she was picked to like be the vessel, but it was like, if God comes to you, or the angel Gabriel comes to you, like, what are you gonna say?
I'd be like, no heart.
No heart.
But like I thought the whole thing of it was trying to turn the like Immaculate Conception on its head.
I think that's really interesting. No, you're right. I think that's a thing they were trying to make it like the reverse story, because her name is Rosemary. Like, obviously that's playing on Mary. So I think you're right to draw that kind of parallel.
Yeah, I didn't, and maybe because it like, obviously that scene that took place post like rape scene / dream sequence, it was very domestic, them just like waking up, and that's probably why then I'd like turned off my, I don't know, again, like I think it's so hard to form any kind of opinion of around that rape scene. I don't really know how to, but I use what Zeba said, it kind of, that in a way, like the fact that it's intertwined with the narrative and like the whole religious aspect, in a way, then might strip it of some of the like more social context.
I think like,
I mean, not wholly, but
like watching
in that
like
time.
any movie from, I would say, less than recently, like I remember rewatching 16 Candles and thinking like, there's a whole rape scene in here that's completely justified, and they still make the guy the hero at the end of the day, even though he just gives his girlfriend to like the nerdy guy while she's drunk and passed out, and he's like, have some fun. And the movie was not critiqued at all during that time. And so, like, watching this, I was just thinking, like, how many films that are from the 60s and 70s and 80s and later have these, like, subtle things that are not so subtle ways to be like, oh, this person was definitely sexually assaulted, but it's okay. Because I guess people just weren't critically thinking of how terrible that was to put in a movie.
It's like the very first, like, I feel like with all films, the very first part of, like, trying to argue for a social cause is to give it representation in the very first instance, even if they can't outright condemn it yet because the social wave hasn't happened, you know? Like, so it's like, okay, we can't, like, fully show the intricacies of marital rape, but we'll have one scene which is a bit uncomfortable, and that will, like, get people thinking about it. Although that implies that Polanski is trying to advocate.
And I think
for
he actually wrote
film,
Rosemary's Baby, so I don't think he was thinking it at all. I think he just put it in there because it was, like, normal for that time period, like Zeba was saying, and she wasn't really questioning it because in her head, maybe she had heard of this happening before, and she was trying to rationalize it, especially because she was so religious. We as an audience in 2020 are watching it like, he totally just raped his wife and this is illegal.
So if we're relating it back to the monstrous womb, I think, like, what do you guys think of this sort of underlying or maybe unconscious, like, ableist fears? Because, you know, like, in, like, as we spoke about in the intro kind of a little bit about how the monstrous womb canon is all about, like, what monster will she give birth to, or what is she gonna give birth to? It's like, I think has, like, very ableist roots, like playing on existing fears of, like, birthing a deformed child, which in many cultures was actually seen as a punishment for sin from God, or like a demonic interference or some sort.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of horror does, like body horror, plays on that sort of unconscious fear. I think also the fact that the baby isn't, it's baby's half human, half Satan, like that sort of idea at the end. I'm not sure if I thought about what the baby looked like all that much.
Even his red eyes?
Yeah.
Oh, apart from the eyes, yeah.
She does have this constant anxiety throughout the pregnancy, though, which I think is super realistic, of, like, you know, which doctor to see and what vitamins to take, and should it be natural, or should I take vitamins, or should I give birth in a hospital that's sterile, or should I... They're like, that is... It's sort of associated with her hysteria, which I think is interesting in the womb point of like, they gaslight her into thinking that she's going crazy. But I think that anxiety while being pregnant is super real, and also a symptom of ableism to a certain extent. It sort of goes along with that anti-vaxxer point of, like, what if I vaccinate my kid and they're autistic? It's like, okay, I'd rather have an autistic kid than a sick kid or a dead kid. Like, to me that seems super easy of a choice. But they sort of conflate it with her anxieties around the Coven, like, fucking with her head as well, which, I mean, it's all about, I mean, the womb is all about, he literally calls it postpartum crazies, I think, in the end, like, after she gives birth. Prepartum crazies.
Yeah, I have those every day. I have prepartum crazies every day.
I actually don't, and this might
oh god
sort of I don't know, put a spanner in the works. I don't really think Rosemary's role in this film, I don't think it's pointing to herself or her womb as monstrous, despite the fact that she's carrying carrying Satan. I think she's very much in this film portrayed as a victim, as we said, who's being gaslighted and forced to carry this child. There doesn't seem to be like a sort of underlying anxiety or uncanniness around her. There's not so much, apart from that one nude scene when she's raped. I don't know. I can't pinpoint any scenes.
I was reading one review which was like talking about how, like, Polanski, or the writer in general, like, made it a conscious decision to let the audience know that she was carrying Satan's baby rather than have it be revealed, like, at the very end. So I think even if, like, Rosemary is seemingly like an innocent vessel, the anxiety that the audience is, like, fearing for what she's about to carry kind of makes her her womb monstrous because you know it's literally carrying a monster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It totally makes sense. I think maybe there's not the sort of the purest way that we've been talking about Monstrous Womb in the past, where there's more sort of like that, I can't remember what it's called, the like vagina dentata, the images of like open mouths. There's not so much like that sort of symbolism, and I guess that goes off of what we said about the film not actually having much gore, because it's quite like it's a movie all about being gaslighted. There isn't so much of that overt symbolism or imagery, so you wouldn't have like a fucking gaping mouth, oh that's a vagina type thing.
What I thought was interesting was, because the audience knows what baby Rosemary is carrying, and I feel like throughout the movie we get that she has like an inkling that something is wrong because of like the eating the raw meat, and she just seems so not at ease the entire time. And obviously because she was so religious she didn't want to get an abortion, but I think it brings up, maybe just to the audience, the fact that it would have been morally correct in this case for her to get an abortion because of what she was bringing into the world. So I feel like in a sense her womb becomes monstrous because once she even figures out what the baby is, and she like has all the cult people being like, hell blank, whose name I'm not gonna say because I don't play them games, and she has all of them around doing that, and her first instinct isn't to be like, I need to take this baby out because of what will happen to the world. It's just like she just ends up embracing it and becoming a mother to this child that she knows is going to eventually bring the end of the world. So the morality behind that and like her religion is questionable to me, because we know that it would have been morally correct for her to abort the child of Satan, and we also know that it would have been morally correct for her to end it right there as soon as they said it. And it wasn't like she had a knife. It wasn't like any of them were holding her back when she like yanks back the blanket and is like, oh my god. Like there was nothing stopping her from being like, oh my gosh, let me take this baby out. Which, I mean, it sounds weird in hindsight of like what I'm saying, but it would have been morally correct because the baby would bring about the end of times when it became of age. And if she was as religious as the audience is made to believe, she would have did that without a doubt because of her belief in Christ.
So you think it's like weirdly pro-choice? It's kind of true because I just googled that abortion was made legal in the United States in 1973, and considering this was released in 1968, that is like a very slim margin. So it might be like it might have been riding on a sort of pro-choice wave.
And I think even if you are the strictest Catholic, you'd still have some reservations about killing a baby, even though, and a baby that you carried, I think you'd still have reservations about killing a baby, even if it is half Satan.
I think like in my head, I'm still thinking of it like as a baby with some red eyes, but if it literally has hooves and stuff like Zeba was saying in the book, like I would be like, this is clearly something, this is not it. Because if it doesn't even remotely really resemble a human and she's like staring at this beastly creature in a crib, I think it wouldn't be that hard for her to, I guess, be like, for the greater good of humanity and to not bring about the end of times and, you know, damn everyone to hell, perhaps I should take out this baby.
But do you think her sort of embracing of motherhood at the end, I think that's like a really horrific moment. Like her smile is really uncanny. I think ironically, because we don't see the baby and she ends up deciding to mother it, even though you know it's so horrific, makes us like almost displace the monstrosity from the situation and the baby to her again, because you're like, what, she's gonna mother it kind of thing. And I think, yeah, it brings us back to that, like, there's something monstrous about a woman's bond to her, or mother's bond to her child.
Maybe this is telling of me, I didn't find the end in which she smiles and decides to mother the child that scary. I was like, yeah, okay.
Opinions.
Fuck off, Louisa!
You're always like, I thought that was cool. I would totally mother Satan.
Maybe that's it. This is my indirect way of proclaiming that. Her as a character, someone who desperately wanted a child, who was also a little bit of a pushover, I'm kind of like, yeah, she'd be convinced into mothering Satan.
You're like, story checks out. Twiggy would do it.
Rocky.
Trying to get me to be his mother.
Aren't you his mother?
Jumping forward in time, we are now going to talk about the 2019 film The Room, directed by Christian Volckman. In this weird film, young couple Kate and Matt move into a new home and soon discover that the house contains a magical room which grants them any item they wish. But there's a catch. If any object made in the room leaves the house, it ages rapidly and turns to dust. In an attempt to avoid yet another miscarriage, Kate decides to use the room to make a baby called Shane. But the child's unconventional conception makes Matt suspect that Shane has sinister intentions.
What the fuck is wrong with you? I took a shortcut. You used the room to make a baby. A baby is not a thing. Yes, it is.
Obviously, I feel 4 out of 4 of us didn't enjoy this movie.
I didn't hate it. I felt like the ending was like a lot.
Let's start from the beginning. We put on the screen. They discover a magical room, and their reaction.
The thing that
is stupid.
That I don't like is like they didn't think it was weird that there was a magical room inside their house. Like there was absolutely no questioning of it at all. They were like, "Oh, this is so normal." It was like
they didn't try to like contact the people who sold them the house, or like there was no like let me call some people, let me hop on Google. Like even in Twilight they researched about the demon baby. Like there was some questioning.
Also her husband had wished for like a room full of stuff before he even called her in there. He was like, wish for something, and she was for $1,000. He was like, why didn't I think of that? And I was like, you mean to tell me you wished for all this stuff in this room before you even called your wife, and you didn't even think to wish for money?
His whole, like, artist, the folly of an artist thing that he had going on, corny as fuck, and reminded me of, like, all the men I went to.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he did wish for all those paintings first, and I was like, can paintings feed you? Can they clothe you?
I'd be like...
They feed your spirit.
Like, give me the cure for cancer. I don't know. In a bottle.
He just wished for the dumbest stuff.
What I really, really hated is that, like, weird montage that we get after they've the sort of 5 minutes that they've realised this is happening, and then they've processed it and they've decided to just go full steam ahead and wish for everything. And then we get this weird ass cheesy montage of them like screwing around, ordering whatever they want. It's just made me really hate them.
Why did they have to do like drugs and stuff?
I think
like it seemed so out of character.
I think the tagline for this movie is like, the only thing more dangerous than a man who can't get what he wants is someone who can get everything they want, and that's exactly what they started to do.
The only thing more dangerous than a person who can't get what they want is a person who gets whatever they want.
Like, they just started wishing for stuff that they didn't even want, and that's why, like, after you get that montage, she's, like, sitting on the swing, and she's all depressed, and she doesn't even care where the jewelry is, and she's like, I'll just wish for some more. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Everything is meaningless. I do like that, like, the room as like a womb, because like they kind of even sound like each other if you say it fast enough, and it's not like the traditional thing where we see her go through. If you say it fast enough, it sounds like,
well, it's an obvious rhyme. What do you mean if you say it fast enough?
You don't need to do that in order to make the connection.
The room womb in this movie is the opposite almost of like every other monstrous womb trope to me, because it's like it is the evil place eventually, but it's like the site of wish fulfillment. It is a forbidden sort of place because it's obscured originally, but it's like the place where all your needs are met, sort of like I was saying at the beginning. Like, to me, I'm like, yeah, why are we so afraid of the womb? Like, that is the place we should want to return. Like, that is the place where you have no responsibilities, all your needs are met, it's safe from the outside world, it's safe from aging. If we're gonna go into the Oedipus complex, which I think that we will eventually in this discussion, like, there's this innate need to return to the womb, or sex is a return to the womb, or a return to the mother, or a return to the thing that nurtures you and gives you everything you need. Like, this is the idealized womb as it's imagined in the like Freudian sense. So it's, to me, felt very different from the monstrous womb as it's described.
Yeah.
I know that the room, the wish room, is supposed to in the sort of more direct interpretation of it is the womb. But don't you think the sort of basement wiry room is more womb-like? The sort of the machine room, like where the powers are supposedly generated.
Not my
that
womb.
as like archaic mother trope happening again. So,
Yeah.
Like, but I thought it was like all connected. Like the whole house is basically like the womb, you know? Because it's like when he like goes through the walls and stuff, it turns out that they're all like wired like that.
And then only when you like exit the house does what you wish for go away. Like you can leave the room.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would agree with Louisa that it's kind of
like
the whole house.
The locus.
And like how when we talked about Alien in episode 2, the sort of hallways of the ship, the machinery, the idea of the artificial birth, we kind of get that here, and the sort of the industrial sort of words, can't think of them. The industrial origin of like the house's power. It could be that same sort of asexual birth.
I guess that's why I think it's like the archaic mother, because it's like there's no actual mother present. It's just which is indicative of the archaic mother, because it's always like she's absent, but she's like signified by imagery. And like I think in a similar way to Alien, that's kind of like why Zeba, I think this goes from like a monstrous or a happy womb to a monstrous womb, because it's like similar to Alien, and where there's just like an anxiety over this artificial reproduction that's happening. And I think that happens with the father, like because if you think about it, like there's nothing, unlike in Rosemary's Baby where we have an actual demon being birthed, but if you think about it in this film, like there's nothing actually monstrous about Shane. It's just the fact that he was created by unconventional means. Like, he doesn't actually do anything at the beginning, like when he's a child. When he's a child, he doesn't... Stop looking at me like that. When he's a child, he doesn't do anything. And I would argue that it's the way the father treats him, like he's a monster, which is what leads to him becoming like that.
Well, it's like scientifically an evolution thing where, like, if the baby doesn't look like the father, then babies come out looking more like the dad, because if they don't look like the dad, then they can reject the child. And it's like the same way in animals. So the fact that I think Shane doesn't look anything like him kind of is why he's so unattached, and he knows for a fact it's not his child. He like completely just rejects the child, like Louise was saying. And Shane is like pretty normal when he's a kid. He just likes to play and read his books and hang out with his mom. Like he doesn't hate the dad. In fact, like he wants the dad to like him. And then they got in that whole argument where he's like, "You're a figment," and like and the dad even tries to initiate his death by not telling the wife that he would turn to dust if he goes outside. So I think
that's what I mean. I think he gives him the complex. Like I think he so often, but even by calling him a figment, it's like delegitimizing his whole origin story. And I think that's what makes Shane so obsessed with getting an origin story that he's willing to rape his mother. I think he's like, I think the dad initiates Shane into seeing him as competition for the mother's affection, rather than like his child, who also is deserving of his affection. His dad initiates like this competition of like, it's either you're gonna end or I'm gonna end, but we're not sharing my wife. And I feel like it creates Shane to be what he becomes. I agree. So we're on the nurture side of this.
I'm in full support of Matt, who knew from the beginning, and you're right, it definitely plays later into the whole Oedipal complex, the sort of like competition between father and son. But at the beginning, he is completely correct in trying to get rid of the baby once she wishes this child into the world. Like, and his hostility after that is so valid, because this child is creepy as hell and has a weird ass British accent, which I don't know why Why is that? It really freaked me out. Why is he British? Is it like the British villain trope?
Yeah,
I really hope it is.
Yeah. You sound really sinister.
Yeah.
Out of all of us, you're definitely the most sinister sounding.
So yeah, I think although, and we're meant to feel sad, we're meant to feel sort of empathetic towards the wife because of this miscarriage backstory, but I don't think that's not like developed enough that I actually care, if I'm honest.
Fuck. I disagree with you. I think you're meant to blame her. I think we have another sort of wait, I wrote it. Yeah, another monstrous mother. Like, I think it goes like, it's kind of what you said in the in our second episode about Psycho Zeba, where it's like classic Freudian bullshit, where she almost gets blamed indirectly because it's like, you should have listened to the dad, because she like, it kind of shows her as constructing him as monstrous because she like suffocates him, and it's like the castrated son thing. Because she's like, you can't leave the house, you can't do anything. But obviously she's doing it because she's coming from this place of trauma because of a miscarriage, and she also knows that if he goes outside, he'll die. But the film kind of does it as like, well, you should have known better not to use this magic room, which is why I'm more...
After they have Shane, and he like takes her in the room and is like, I'm wish him away, and she can't do it, and she says, well, you do it, and he busts out crying, he can't do it either. I was like, well, I mean... if you couldn't do it, you can't really hold your wife accountable for not being able to wish away the baby.
But he doesn't. And also, that's the same thing of like Rosemary killing Devil Baby. I think there's a fundamental
but Shane was a
thing
baby.
within us where it's quite difficult
Shane
to kill
was an
babies.
baby. Like, in that sense,
I know, yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, no, they can't wish away the baby. But I'm like, I don't know what the hell was in that crib with Rosemary.
But Shane could have been the end of the world. They had no idea the origin of this room. They had no idea how the mechanics worked. This could have been a devil baby. They had no idea. It's the same kind of unknown.
I don't feel like it was. I don't feel like the stakes
like
were as high because
devil.
I'm like, they had been eating food out of that room and stuff anyway. So if it was evil, they were already gone. Like they had already eaten the fruit. They had already taken way too many things for it to be like a turn back and being like, but we didn't keep the baby, so we're not evil. Like, I think at that point they knew that it was just a baby that didn't belong to them, and so I think that's why he felt weird about it. But also, like, when he makes the nurse ring, he was like, I want a baby, like, and she's like, well, I can't carry it, and he was like, well, let's try. It kind of felt like he was implying that he wanted her to wish for a baby, almost. Or, like,
I think Tyia and I are on the same side of this film. We saw the same film. You and Zeba saw someone else.
I feel like he was like pushing her into it.
What makes...
And he didn't specify like, don't use the room to have the baby. He was like, I want us to have a baby, and that's what would complete us, and then you'll be happy.
But what makes Shane so monstrous then? Like, if it's like, I don't get it. What about him innately?
Well, he grew too fast because he left the room for like a hot sec.
Because of the dad.
Yeah, because of the dad, yes. But also, like, developmentally, he didn't have a middle childhood. Like, something fucked him up, like, in that moment where, like, he didn't get the home training.
I think it was probably his dad letting him go outside to burn alive.
Yeah, it's totally Matt's fault.
He didn't know that.
His dad was
aware.
standing. His dad was holding the door as the mom screamed for him to help. I think.
Yeah, but that's when he was a baby.
I think that trauma was somewhere in there.
Well, okay. Regardless of the trauma inflicted on him, the fact that he was born in this sort of, let's say, unconventional way.
Why are you pro-life? Like, why aren't you? Why don't you like artificial insemination?
If this was a film about that, then go ahead, Shane, with your creepy ass British accent. But it's not. There is no set. This film is about materialism. Okay, there's no fucking pro-life shit here. It's just a creepy ass child who's born out of this magic room.
He's not creepy when he was not a creepy kid. He was a creepy child. When he made that little snow room and all he wanted to do was build snow angels with him in camp, he was not evil and he was not creepy.
He was too powerful. British. He was too powerful.
I'm not saying he's innately evil. Yeah, I'm saying that I'm agreeing with Zeba's sort of, I guess, diagnosis that he did not have the proper development as a child.
But he
and therefore,
could have.
No, because he ages.
Because of
the dad, yeah.
There's nothing to
Not, it's
indicate.
not all because of the dad.
The dad
It
literally
is because of the
dragged
dad.
him out of his little snow room, like, and was like, I told you never to be in there.
He was
yeah,
abusive.
His dad was abusive. He tried to kill him. And, I mean, the mom, obviously...
You could argue this isn't human. I'm sorry, he's not human. I would argue so strongly that this child's not human. He even calls him a figment. Like,
yeah,
no, there's
the
no
dad
way.
does, because he's a hater, much like you, apparently.
I'm so on his side in this. Like, the idea that things will turn to dust as you leave, yeah, that's a great anchor for being human.
It's magic.
But the guy who was in...
What? It was... This is because...
No, but the guy who was in the prison for, like, killing his family, who actually turned out to be a figment whose parents died so that he could have, like, a life, but he was, like, in a mental asylum. Like, he was perfectly fine. He didn't kill them, they killed themselves so that he could have a life, and then he got framed for it. And we see that he got out and he didn't do anything wrong. People just assumed he did it because he was the only person in the house. But that proves that, like, when he went into society, he wasn't an evil person. He was just trying to live his life, but he ended up in a mental hospital. And he even gave Matt all those tips. So I feel like him being condemned to a house all day isn't really, like, a strong argument for him not being human, because he doesn't do anything cruel until we see the final acts of the movie, once he has all of the trauma inflicted on him from Matt.
Again, I think the issue here, I'm not arguing against your, like, ideology of the film, because I think that sounds all in line. But the fact that... No.
I'm not touching your ideology, but...
I agree with it. That's what I'm saying. I agree with what you're saying, your reading of it. However, I don't think the film, the fact that it doesn't have any, like, grounding for what actually this room is, and I'm not saying you don't always have to, like, spoon feed the audience, but the fact that we don't have, like, any foundation for that means that we can't make any basis on the ethics of this film. Also, the fact it's not really about Shane in the end, is it? Even though they make it about him.
What?
I'm not going to name which celebrities, but some of them keep having children that they don't take care of because it's a part of their materialism, because they feel like to have unlimited children that they don't have to take care of because all of their needs are met and they can wish for a bottle or have a nanny go get it. It's part of materialism, and that sometimes people treat children like materials.
I want to name them because I have an idea of a horror movie about, like, somebody who can have unlimited babies through surrogates and just keeps popping them out until they have an army because they have unlimited resources. I think about it at least once a week.
Please write it.
I'm working on it. Yeah, of course. You can be the surrogates.
I have the stupid Twiggy body. I'm not the
I also have the Twiggy body.
Woman.
That's what they like for horror movies.
Can we talk about the ending?
So I guess we can reel it to the end, since Mila really wants to talk about how much she hates Shane, and now we can find out why.
It's not even that I hate Shane. I think Shane's just a victim of this terrible movie.
I mean, there's like sort of the climax where the kid makes the house in the house and the double and the second father and the sort of, like, paradoxical universe, and then there's the end scene.
I will say, I did think, like, the descent into the Oedipus fable, or whatever you want to call it, I thought that was clever, because, like, you don't understand who's died, what's going on from that disoriented fight scene between him and the dad, and then when he has taken on the dad's identity and she only figures it out because of him chewing the ice. I thought all of that was very clever, because, like, if the audience hadn't paid attention to him, like, chewing the ice earlier in the movie, then they wouldn't have understood why she was, like, immediately like, no. But I just thought it was clever, like, the entire sequence of you figuring out what exactly happened and how Shane had created this alternative house within the room and all of that. I thought that was quite clever. It was just the execution of it that was not great. And, like, having Shane pull a splice and, like, rape his mom and get her pregnant, like, that turned weird quickly.
What do you think of, like, why they do that? Because Creed slash Kristeva, quoting Kristeva, she says that, like, the subject who fantasizes about giving birth to himself does so in order to cut his ties with his mother. So by, like, weird turn of events, this would again be sort of like the suffocating, the castrated son trope, where he's like, I'm gonna get my own individuality by like weirdly going back to the beginning. And it's kind of what I was saying earlier about like writing yourself an origin story so that he could possibly separate from the mother. And again, it kind of...
No, you can continue, and then
goes back to blaming Kate.
I don't know, because like the thing is, I don't know if he necessarily wanted to get Kate pregnant. I think he literally just saw them going at it, and he was like, "Oh, I want to try this."
Oh no, I don't think he wanted to get her pregnant either. I mean, he's like, I'm more going from a literal return to the womb perspective, like almost giving birth to himself kind of thing.
Was her husband
I think he was
unable to get her pregnant because she was able to get pregnant from Shane so easily?
Oh yeah, maybe he was the infertile one.
Ooh.
Oh my god, maybe that's why he hates him so much.
I mean, I interpreted that like Shane trying to have sex with his mom as like, yes, return to the womb, and also the competition with the father, and like this seems to be the thing that you do that she likes, and it's the only thing I haven't tried yet. It's disgusting. I know it's disgusting, but that's like how the Oedipus complex works. It's like if you're in constant competition with the father for the mother's attention, like in his underdeveloped mind that skipped years of nurturing, that's what he thinks he's supposed to do.
I did think it was weird that he knew he needed to age up in order to even initiate anything of that caliber. But I mean, granted, I'm glad that they did that, because I would have been ultra grossed up. They would have tried to do it with him as a kid. That would have been really fucking weird.
How did he...
But he knew he needed to age up so that he could properly like fight the father, and he had the gun and everything waiting for him. Mm-hmm. So
but I don't think it was about age. I think it was about...
It was about, like, body.
Yeah, he just had to become the husband.
But when he came back in the house and he looked like someone from, like, a freaking outback of Australia or something. I don't know. He just looked very distressed with red hair that he did not previously have. His hair was like reddish when he came back, and he was like shirtless.
Oh my god, you're right.
He ages up and he has like the gun. I was like, where did he come from? This does not even remotely look like the child.
I guess I forgot that he tries to attack her before he impersonates him. So
and then it doesn't work, and she like freaks out, and he ends up like almost shooting. I think he ends up shooting her by accident or something like that. Because the dad like dove in the way. Matt like dove on him, and it made the gun fire. And then that's when he's like realizes that he has to like pretend to be Matt in order to like win her affection. He's dead. He's gone like we always wanted. And he like carries her into...
I want to know how he did that. Because his powers...
He made a room inside of the room. He made the house inside of the room. And I guess that's why we...
But how did he make himself like that?
I don't know. I guess he had to wish for himself to be Matt, which was even weirder. Or maybe he wished for like a Matt suit.
Yeah.
So, final scene where they've escaped the room. Shane is now dead. He dies in that sort of weird, like, it reminded me of Voldemort when he's like all shriveled up.
Oh my god, I was gonna say that! Because it basically rips off Harry Potter, because the room is like the room of requirement.
Okay, I'm not quite on the same level of
room of
dedication to Harry Potter.
Excuse me. What?
You've lost me there.
You don't know what the room of requirement is?
No, I did not read Harry Potter. I'm sorry.
Alright, it's a magical room where you go in and anything you need appears.
Oh my god, this is a... Oh.
So, when I say it's a Harry Potter ripoff, I mean it.
Okay, yeah, sorry, back to... So, Shane is dead. Shane has also... So, previously Shane has raped the mum. Now he's dead. The couple have escaped. They're in a motel. Then she gets the pregnancy stick, finds out she's preggers, light flash in the background.
Which indicates the presence of the room's magic, because it happened throughout the whole film.
Yeah, or at least just Shane's sort of presence.
This might be... I think I'm just overthinking this, but I wonder if the child will look like Shane since he got her pregnant while he was as Shane.
Again, I don't think you're at fault for not understanding this. I think it's a fault of the movie and like the shaky foundation of like we don't understand, and not in a good, ambiguous, mysterious way. We don't understand
the logistics
because there's so many inconsistencies. Yeah, Yeah.
There's no consistent lore. Like you're gonna drive yourself in circles trying to like figure out the rules of this universe, because I don't think that the writers have established rules for themselves.
I will say it did follow like Oedipus like almost exactly, because like when he kills the dad, he is like technically the king of the castle in the new house that he creates within the room, and he does get his mother pregnant, and it is still like that absolute horrific scene that they have in Oedipus when she realizes what's happened. The only thing is he just didn't successfully kill the father, which is why it almost reverts back to like the initial fight between him and the dad, but the dad wins because he didn't quite complete the what do they call it? Prophecy.
We get like a tiny bit of that lore in terms of the figment who's in the mental hospital, who looks like Terry Richardson with his glasses. He like talks about I mean, he goes off on like materialism, but then he also talks about like Nietzsche's like God is dead. So there's a sense of the creator, and like there's a little bit of that, but it's all like it's so embarrassingly like surface level, so that you don't really actually, well, even not even that, it's kind of handed to you, but then it doesn't follow through, because it ends up with this like Oedipal, I don't know, finish.
I think this film, the ending is like kind of disappointing, because in one way that the film was like not disputing like the whole canon of the monstrous feminine tropes in horror, because it still very much, as we said, relates to the archaic mother with womb imagery, and that's still relating back to women's bodies. However, it did kind of dispute the monstrous womb horror trope, because it wasn't actually happening inside of her body. Like, for once, the locus of horror was outside of her person. But then it kind of was annoying, because right at the end, it went right back to the whole genre of monstrous womb, which is like, and what is she gonna give birth to? And I'm like, right. Oh, we were so close to not doing that, and then we did it.
It was, a bit of a cheap ending.
Yeah, a little bit.
Thank you for listening to The Monstrous Feminine. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, SoundCloud, and Spotify at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please leave us lots of comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Brooms up, witches out.